Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kara, and in today's video I'm going to be breaking down the Buncombe County Comprehensive Plan for 2043. If you're not familiar with what this is, basically Buncombe County, which is where Asheville is located, decided to come up with a long-term 20-year plan for how to handle things like population growth, environmental protection, economic growth, and so many other aspects that I'm going to dive in. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a very long video, so if you need to grab a drink or a snack, definitely go and do that, and let's dive right in. I'll start by providing a pretty general overview, and then I'll break up the video into the 7 different planning topics that the county came up with. Quick disclaimer before we get too deep into the video, I just want to say that the comprehensive plan is a 215-page document. I'm going to be leaving the link to that down in the description box if you are interested in reading the entire thing. I actually did read every single page of this document, and I basically broke it down into the main highlights, and if you have heard some other part of it that maybe I didn't mention, you don't need to, mention in the comments, well, you left out this and you left out this. I'm sure that there are going to be things that I'm going to leave out in this video. But I just tried to include kind of the main highlights to give you guys a general overview of what to expect and what the county is planning for over the next 20 years. So just keep that in mind as you're listening to this video. And I'm also going to try to keep it as non-opinionated as possible and really just give you the facts. So Buncombe County experienced a 27% increase in population growth between 2000 and 2019. It is predicted that we'll see continued population growth by maybe 55,000 to 83,000 sometime by 2045. This would be a 20 to 30% increase. I have to say the county really did do a great job over the past couple years of getting the community involved and getting their input on different ideas that they want to see implemented over the next 20 years. Over the past couple years, they actually had 157,000 inputs by the public. The top 3 priorities listed by the public were environmental conservation, housing, and economic development. Additionally, 50% of participants said their biggest concern was losing natural land and agriculture to new development. 80% of people said that the natural environment is what they love most about the county. And 76% of people expressed concerns over housing affordability. So after a ton of input by the community, the county decided to focus on 7 planning topics. Those are growth, equity, and conservation, transportation and connectivity, farms, forests, and environmental conservation, health and recreation, hazards and resilience, infrastructure and energy, and last, economic development, education, and jobs. What I'll do going forward is provide some main goals for each of these topics and then also provide some actions that the county is planning on implementing to achieve these goals. Let's start out with growth, equity, and conservation. Overall, the plan is to promote development and community enhancement in areas near the city. To contrast that, they're planning to focus on environmental preservation and conservation in the more rural areas. Additionally, they plan to promote renewable energy and also green infrastructure. There are also plans to increase housing options and also affordability. Think of things like missing middle housing, which I mentioned in some of my past videos, which are things like duplexes, triplexes, condos, multi-unit housing, things of that sort. Another plan is to promote small area housing in places like Candler, Fairview, and Swannanoa. A really neat thing I saw in this category was that the county decided to create a map to show what their plan is with different areas in the county. I'm going to put a few different maps on the screen to show you what is planned for each area. First, we have protected public lands, where there will be no or extremely limited development. Think of things like Pisgah National Forest. Next, we have conservation working lands, where there will be very limited development. So think of things like agriculture, forests, and open spaces. This is mainly going to be areas like rural Fairview, Leicester, Barnardsville, Candler, places like that. Next, we have rural community, which is quite similar, but there is a slightly larger preference for low-density residential building and very little commercial growth. This area would have things like conservation subdivisions, where a percentage of the land is actually kept for protection. Roughly 30% would be conserved in exchange for homes on some smaller lots. This will be the focus in parts of Fairview, Black Mountain, Weaverville, Leicester, Candler, places like that. Next, we have mixed-use neighborhoods where there will be medium to high-density homes. Think traditional homes, but also townhomes, condos, even mixed-use buildings where you have commercial on the bottom and residential up top. We'll likely see this along the outer edges of Asheville and also Weaverville. Interestingly, they also separated mixed-use area 1 and mixed-use area 2. So mixed-use area 1 is going to be a mix of residential, commercial, and retail space. Think compact, walkable, and well-connected. A couple areas where this will be the focus will be along 74A as you head towards Fairview, and also the I-40 corridor near Swannanoa. Mixed-use area 2 will be more campus-style development, which will include industrial and office spaces as well as housing. This will also be compact, walkable, and well-connected. We'll see this in areas like Arden, Candler, Weaverville, and possibly parts of Black Mountain. Last but not least, we have the institutional category. This will consist of private land holdings for things like tourist facilities, conference, and also resort centers. It probably comes as no surprise that this will largely be the Biltmore area, and also actually a little bit of East Asheville. Now let's talk about some of the actions the county is going to take in order to implement all of these ideas. First off, they're going to review and modify zoning as needed. They're also planning to implement projects and programs for lower income individuals and also increase housing affordability by building a mix of different types of housing. One particularly interesting idea that I read in this category is that the county is considering allowing 2 homes on every lot, no matter the zoning district, assuming that there is enough infrastructure and things like that. I'll throw a little bit of my personal opinion in here. I think that this would be super interesting if the Asheville region actually implemented this idea, because I talk to so many buyers who say, oh, I would love to have a second home on my property for my in-laws, or to rent out as an Airbnb, or to use as a rental, or, for my friends to stay in for a little while. I believe that having this capability would make a lot of people happy, but I am curious to hear your point of view too, so definitely leave your comments down below and let me know. Now, to go along with this, the county did touch on short-term rentals, because I know that that tends to be a very hostile topic because some people hate Airbnbs and how they're becoming so popular now. And if you don't know, I'll just throw this little bit of information in here. The city of Asheville does have restrictions against short-term rentals. There's too much info to cover in today's video for me to talk in depth about it, but the city already does have some things implemented for that. So in this document, the county did actually mention they're considering restricting short-term rentals to maybe just a few different areas. They're not really sure how to tackle it just yet. The last action I have for this category is that they're going to continue to protect steep slopes and ridgelines. If you're not familiar, there is such a thing called the Steep Slope Ordinance and Ridgetop Protection, which basically just means that you either cannot build if the slope is too steep, or you need an architect to get involved and an engineer and a lot of different people, and a very strict and regimented approval process for building on steep slopes in order to prevent landslides, erosion, that sort of thing. And ridgetop protection is for similar reasons, but also for protecting the views around this area. Alright, well that was quite a lengthy section, so let's dive right into the next one, which is transportation and connectivity. So the main goals for this category are to expand transportation options like walking, biking, public transit, electric and renewable fuel vehicles, and also micro-mobility, which I wasn't familiar with that term before reading this, but apparently that just means like bike sharing. To go along with this, they're trying to shift transportation away from single occupancy vehicles, or SOVs, and more towards things like walking, biking, taking public transit. They also plan to expand infrastructure for renewable fuel vehicles. Some of the actions they plan to take to achieve these goals are to improve the networks for walking, biking, taking public transit, driving, etc. I also read in here that they might consider staggering work hours. So in America, of course, we all know that 9 to 5 is kind of the classic work day, but it'd be interesting to see staggered work hours, or maybe some people start at 8, some people start at 11 or 1 or whatever it is. And that would definitely start to, spread out the kind of rush hour and ultimately avoid having a true rush hour. They also suggested that employers offer incentives for workers to not use their single occupancy vehicles and instead to use these more sustainable options. Moving right along to the next category, which is farms, forests, and environmental conservation. Starting out with the main goals, I believe that I actually mentioned this first statistic in one of my previous videos, or I at least posted it online somewhere, but the county is planning on getting 20% of its total acreage conserved by 2030. Another goal is to conserve areas that promote clean water, wildlife protection, nature-based recreation, etc. As I mentioned a bit earlier in the first category, they plan to preserve farms, forests, and also working lands. Lastly, they also plan to manage, enhance, and restore natural areas through things like water resource management, stream restoration, flood mitigation, and invasive and non-native vegetation control. So some of the actions for this category are to explore different funding opportunities for conservation, restoration projects, and things like that. They also plan to strengthen support for agricultural development and develop guidelines to protect the viewshed along the Blue Ridge Parkway. Alright, next category is economic development, education, and jobs. Some of the main goals here are to expand industry opportunities and create higher wage jobs. It's also going to be to promote more affordable housing close to these employment hubs. So think about some of the mixed-use neighborhoods that I mentioned earlier where you have kind of more campus-style growth. The plan is also to promote more economic development that supports agriculture and rural communities. And last but not least, they're going to prioritize manufacturing and industrial opportunities that are more sustainable and environmentally friendly. Some of the specific actions for this category will be to identify suitable sites and buildings for economic development. There's also the idea of promoting permanent farmers market locations. The only permanent one that I'm aware of right now is the WNC Farmers Market. I know that over the spring and summer there are plenty that pop up in East Asheville, River Arts District, North Asheville, really all over. But there's not really a permanent one except for that one that I mentioned. The county also plans to improve educational attainment through developmental programs. Lastly, they also plan to explore some funding tools for improvements and expansion of things like the utility sector, transportation, community infrastructure, affordable housing, etc. Moving right along, let's talk now about health and recreation. The county plans to expand recreational opportunities such as greenways and parks for the underserved communities. They also plan to expand access to health services and support healthy lifestyles. Some actions here would be to create new recreational programs and facilities while also supporting the pre-existing ones. They also plan to develop more trails and host more events in county parks to build a sense of community. Lastly, they would support the development of community gardens and more local grocery stores. Let's talk now about hazards and resilience. The main goal here is to manage existing and future environmental impacts via green infrastructure and nature-based solutions to reduce risk of things like flooding, wildfires, and landslides. One of the main actions here would be to increase awareness about green infrastructure. If you're new to my channel and aren't familiar, this year I actually became a green designee, meaning that I am more qualified to help people buy, sell, and invest in properties that are rated as green homes, or even just remodeling to make your home more green and more energy efficient and sustainable. This, of course, helps your health as well as your wallet. If you guys ever have any questions on anything like that, always feel free to reach out to me. My contact info is always in the description box and at the end of most of my videos. The county also plans to employ different design standards, so the steep slope ordinance, which I mentioned earlier, but also things like burying electrical lines. There are also plans to build resiliency hubs for emergency events. Another idea is to develop flood early warning sign systems that would basically measure the water level in different culverts and send out alerts telling people when the road might begin to flood. I actually read that this is already being implemented or was kind of like a test project in, I believe it was East Asheville, kind of near like Haw Creek, Swannanoa area. And I actually wasn't even aware of that before, but I think it's pretty cool. And as far as I know, that project is going pretty well. Last but not least, they talked about implementing some controlled burns. All right, if you made it this far, that is awesome. Hang in there. We only have one more section, and that is infrastructure and energy. Buncombe County has actually committed to converting its internal operations by 2030 and energy usage of the entire Buncombe County community by 2042 to 100% renewable energy. I think that this is a pretty aggressive goal, but pretty interesting nonetheless. They also have the goal of coordinating infrastructure growth with municipal and utility partners. Additionally, they're planning for long-term sustainability of public services like solid waste management, emergency services, etc. Lastly, and this is a big one, they're planning to expand cell and internet service throughout the area. In order to achieve all these goals, they're planning to conduct assessments to evaluate the current needs and also future needs for water and wastewater services. As I mentioned earlier, they will also increase electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Additionally, they plan to provide incentives for solar panel installation and also increase recycling and composting initiatives. Well, that was a lot of information that I just shared with you guys, and I really do hope that you gained something out of it. I realize that you might be sitting there thinking, well, you never touched on the homeless population and the healthcare system and, whatever it is you might be thinking. And that is true. And the county actually did cover this a little bit at the very tail end of their comprehensive plan. They said that there were some community ideas that just didn't quite fit into the 7 different categories that they chose. However, they are still going to consider them when coming up with new policies as well as community investments. So let me share some of those community ideas. Some of them were improve quality of education, offer affordable daycare and early childhood education, improve the healthcare system, address homelessness, increase mental health services, address public safety concerns, increase basic income, and create a voting day holiday. Well, that definitely covers it for today's video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. I really kept things just to the facts and tried to keep my opinions at a minimum, mainly just because there was so much information to cover. But if you are actually curious about reading or just sifting through the 215-page comprehensive plan, I will leave a link to that down in the description box below, so definitely check that out. Also, please consider hitting the like button and leave me a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite part was. I feel like I'm losing my voice a little bit. This video took so long to prepare for. I mean, reading through the 215 pages and then condensing that into like a 3 to 4 page Word document was just a lot of work. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely hit that subscribe button down below if you want to see more videos about the Asheville area and also the real estate market. All right, everyone, I'll see you very soon in the next one.